Hello and welcome to our podcast episode number 65. One man's rage against injustice tears Los Angeles apart. I am Thomas and I am here with my friend Timothy. Tonight, we are going to talk about Falling Down. Falling Down is a 1993 American psychological thriller film directed by Joel Schumacher, written by Ebby Rose Smith and released by Warner Bros. In the United States on February 26, 1993. The plot summary of the film is William Fenns Foster is stuck in Los Angeles traffic on a hot day. After his air conditioning fails, he abandons his car and begins walking, carrying his briefcase. Well, Tim, did you enjoy Falling Down?
Well, Thomas, I did find it quite interesting, especially as it was directed by Joel Schumacher, who is known for his work on Batman Forever and The Lost Boys. However, I have to say that while Falling Down has its moments, it didn't quite live up to the hype for me.
Oh, really? I actually found it to be a very compelling film. It had me on the edge of my seat from start to finish. The character development was superb, and Michael Douglas' portrayal of William D. Fenns Foster was exactly riveting.
Now, Thomas, let's not get ahead of ourselves here. While Michael Douglas did give strong performance, I felt that the story itself was a bit too predictable and relied too heavily on cliches. Not to mention some of the more unbelievable plot points, like him being able to carry around an actual rocket launcher through Los Angeles without anyone batting an eye.
Well, I think that's where the thriller aspect comes into play. The film is meant to push boundaries and create tension, even if some of the events are a bit far-fetched. Besides, it's not like audiences are going to be expecting realism in a movie about a man on a rampage through Laos.
I see your point there, Tom. But for me, a good film should still maintain some semblance of plausibility despite its more outlandish elements. It's hard to fully invest in the story when you find yourself constantly questioning how things could possibly unfold this way.
Fair enough, Tim. But I think we can both agree that Falling Down raises some interesting questions about society and the pressures people face on a daily basis. It's just a shame that some of those themes get lost amidst all the chaos and violence.
Indeed, Thomas.
It's hard not to feel empathy for D. Fenns as he struggles against
what seems like an endless string of setbacks and indignities. His descent into violence is certainly disturbing, but it also serves as a stark reminder of the consequences when people feel like they have nowhere left to turn.
And that's exactly why I think Falling Down is such an important film. It forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about our society and how we treat each other. The movie serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of letting frustration and despair fester, but it also raises questions about whether there are enough safety valves in place for people who feel like they're being pushed to their limits.
I see your point, Tom, but at the same time, I can't help but feel that the film perhaps glamorizes Fenns' actions a bit too much. The way he's portrayed as some sort of anti-hero who takes matters into his own hands could send the wrong message to some viewers. It's important not to forget that while there may be underlying reasons for his behavior, what he does is still unacceptable and has serious consequences for those around him.
That's a valid concern, Timothy. However, I think the film does a good job of showing the human cost of D. Fenns' actions throughout. From the innocent bystanders who are caught in the crossfire to his own daughter and ex-wife, there are plenty of reminders that his rampage has very real consequences for others.
That's true, Tom.
It's just a shame that some viewers might not take away those lessons from the film.
But Getting back to the plot, I have to say that I found the ending rather surprising. The final confrontation between Defense and Sergeant Prendergast was intense and left me with mixed emotion. On one hand, it felt like a fitting conclusion to Defense's story, but on the other hand, I couldn't help but wonder about the implications for both characters moving forward.
Yes, the ending was certainly thought-provoking. It seemed to suggest that while Defense's actions couldn't be condoned, they also couldn't be ignored or swept under the rug. Sergeant Prendergast's decision not to retire at the end of his shift felt like an acknowledgement that there were deeper issues at play in their society, and that he wasn't quite ready to walk away from them yet.
That's a good point, Tom.
I also found it interesting how Falling Down manages to touch on several different
social issues throughout the film without feeling preachy or didactic, from class struggles to racism and police brutality. There are a lot of themes at play here that make for some fascinating discussion points.
Unquestionably, Timothy. And speaking of discussions, I think we can both agree that Falling Down is a movie that will continue to spark debates and conversations among viewers for years to come. While it might not be perfect in every aspect, its willingness to confront challenging topics head-on makes it a film that deserves our attention and reflection.
That's an excellent point, Tom.
And speaking of debates and conversations,
I think it would be interesting for our viewers to know that Falling Down was originally intended to have a much different ending. According to director Joel Schumacher, the original cut of the film showed Defense surviving his final confrontation with Sergeant Prendergast, only to be gunned down by other police officers who saw him as too great a threat to let live. This version of the ending was ultimately deemed too bleak and controversial, leading to the more ambiguous conclusion we see in the released film.
Wow, Tim, that's quite surprising. It really shows just how much power studio executives can have over the creative process. I'm glad they decided to go with the final version of the ending, as it feels more fitting for Defense's character arc and leaves room for interpretation on whether he was truly redeemed or not.
Agreed, Tom. And speaking of interpretation, there have been some interesting theories about Falling Down over the years. Some viewers argue that Defense's journey is actually an allegory for America's decline during the 1980s and early 1990s. With his descent into violence representing the nation's growing frustration with social injustice and economic inequality. Others see it as a cautionary tale about the dangers of vigilantism and mob mentality, warning against taking matters into one's own hands when confronted by perceived societal ills.
That's a fascinating perspective, Timothy. I hadn't really thought about it in that way before. It just goes to show how much depth there is to this film if you're willing to dig below the surface. And speaking of the cast, did you know that Falling Down was actually Robert Duvall's first feature film after an 8-year hiatus? He plays a small but pivotal role as Prendergast's boss, who orders him to clean up this mess at the end of the film.
No, I didn't know that, Tom. That's really interesting. It just goes to show how talented Robert Duvall is. To be able to make such an impactful return to film after such a long break. And now back to our discussion about Falling Down. I think it's safe to say that this movie has left its mark on popular culture over the years. From inspiring countless memes and internet discussions to even influencing some real-life copycats who attempted their own versions of Defense rampage through Los Angeles.
Unquestionably, Timothy. And while we may not all agree on whether Falling Down is a perfect film or not, there's no denying its lasting impact and relevance to our society today. It forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our world, and that in itself makes it a powerful work of art.
Yes, Tom, I completely agree with you there.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of the film's impact on popular culture, did you know that Falling Down actually inspired a number of other films and TV shows in the years following its release? You can see its influence in everything from The Dark Knight to Breaking Bad, where protagonists grapple with similar themes of morality, societal pressure, and the consequences of their actions. It just goes to show how timeless and relevant Falling Down's exploration of these issues really is.
Absolutely, Timothy. And I think part of what makes Falling Down so enduring is its ability to balance these heavy themes with moments of levity and human connection. Take, for example, the scene where Dee Fens runs into an old friend from high school, played by Barbara Hershey, who offers him some sympathy and understanding amidst all the chaos he's causing. It's a brief respite from the violence, but also serves as a reminder that even in our darkest moments, there are people who care about us and want to help.
That's a great point, Tom. And speaking of Barbara Hershey, I have to say her performance in Falling Down was truly outstanding. She brought such warmth and vulnerability to the role of Dee Fens' old friend that it really humanized him in ways we might not have expected. Her character serves as a sort of foil for Dee Fens, showing us what could have been if he had made different choices or found better coping mechanisms for his struggles.
I completely agree with you, Timothy. And that's exactly why I think Falling Down is such an effective film. It doesn't just rely on action and suspense to keep us engaged. It also digs deep into the psychology of its characters, forcing us to empathize with them, even when they're doing terrible things. The performances from Michael Douglas and Barbara Hershey are truly exceptional in this regard, and I think that's one of the reasons why the movie has remained so beloved by audiences over the years. "I've always been a fan of Michael Douglas' acting," he began, "and I think his portrayal of William Fens Foster is one of the most nuanced performances of his career. He manages to balance the character's rage and frustration with moments of vulnerability that make Dee Fens feel like a real person rather than just a caricature."
I agree with you on that. Tom Michael Douglas is undoubtedly a talented actor, but I also think it's worth mentioning the other members of the cast who helped bring this story to life. He added. Take, for example, Robert Duvall, who plays Sergeant Prendergast in the film. He brings such gravitas and complexity to his role that you can't help but be drawn into their final confrontation.
Yes, indeed. And let's not forget about the supporting cast members like Barbara Hershey as Dee Fens' old friend from high school, or Tuesday Wells as his ex-wife. They each bring a unique perspective to the story that helps us better understand Dee Fens' motivations and struggles.
It's true, he said thoughtfully. Each actor in Falling Down has done an exceptional job at bringing their character to life. And I think one of the reasons why this film resonates so deeply with audiences is because of the human element these performances add to what could have been a purely sensationalistic story.
Unquestionably, Thomas agreed. The acting in Falling Down is truly top-notch and helps elevate the material beyond what it might have been without such talented performers. It's this level of craftsmanship that makes the film not just entertaining, but also gripping.
Well, so Tom, he continued, in speaking of gripping aspects of Falling Down, I think we should move on to discussing some of the themes it raises about society and human nature. How do you feel these elements contribute to the film's overall impact?
That's an interesting question, Timothy, Tom replied with a thoughtful expression. I believe the themes explored in Falling Down are what give the film its lasting power. It forces us to confront issues like class struggle, racism, and police brutality in a way that makes us question our own biases and preconceived notions.
Yes, I agree with you, Tom. He responded thoughtfully. Falling Down is not just a thriller or an action movie. It's also a social commentary on the state of American society in the early 1990s. And while some of these themes may seem dated now, they still resonate today as we continue to grapple with many of the same issues.
I think that's why Falling Down remains so relevant even after all these years, Tom concluded. It's not just a movie about one man's journey. It's a reflection of our own society and the challenges we face as individuals and communities. And that's what makes it such an enduring piece of art.
I couldn't agree more, Tom, he said with a nod of approval. Now, let's move on to discussing some of the other films and TV shows that have been influenced by Falling Down. Do you think this film has had a lasting impact on popular culture?
Definitely, Thomas replied enthusiastically. Falling Down has inspired numerous works since its release, from films like The Dark Knight to TV shows like Breaking Bad. Its exploration of themes like morality and the consequences of one's actions have become staples in modern storytelling.
I think it's safe to say that Falling Down has left its mark on popular culture, he agreed. And as we continue to discuss this film, let us not forget its artistic influence on other works as well. How do you feel this film has contributed to the cinematic landscape?
I think it's a testament to the power of storytelling and the impact that one movie can have on an entire genre, he said thoughtfully. Falling Down paved the way for other films and TV shows that explore complex themes through the lens of thriller or action, making them more than just mindless entertainment.
Yes, indeed, Tom, he concluded. The artistic influence of Falling Down cannot be overstated. It has shaped the way we think about film and storytelling, pushing boundaries and challenging audiences to engage with difficult topics in a meaningful way. Now that we've discussed the actors and their character, as well as the film's impact on popular culture and its artistic influence, let's move on to our next question. What are some of your favorite scenes from Falling Down? Asked Timothy.
One of my favorite scenes from Falling Down is actually one of its quieter moments. It's the scene where Defense visits his daughter's school and sees her performing in a play. The scene is emotionally charged because it provides a brief glimpse in what could have been for Defense if he hadn't let himself be consumed by anger and frustration. It's a moment of tenderness and connection that serves as a stark contrast to the violence we see throughout most of the film.
I completely agree with you, Tom. That scene really highlights the human side of Defense, reminding us that underneath his rage there is still a father who deeply loves his daughter and wants better for her life. It's a testament to Michael Douglas's acting skills that he can convey so much emotion in such a short scene without resorting to melodrama or overacting.
Absolutely. And speaking of artistic influence, I think this scene from Falling Down serves as an inspiration for similar moments in other films and TV shows. You see it in Breaking Bad, where Walter White attends his son's science fair, or The Dark Knight when Batman confronts the Joker at the hospital. These scenes show that despite their violent tendencies, these characters still have a human side that can be touched by moments of vulnerability and connection.
That's a really interesting perspective, Tom. I never thought about it like that before. It just goes to show how much depth there is to Falling Down storytelling and how its influence extends far beyond the surface level action and suspense. And now back to our discussion of favorite scenes from Falling Down. Do you have any other moments that stand out for you?
Definitely. Another favorite scene of mine takes place at a convenience store where Dee Fens has an altercation with two police officers who are harassing him. The scene escalates quickly and ends with one of the officers being shot dead by Sergeant Prendergast, who arrives on the scene just in time to witness the aftermath. This scene is not only thrilling but also serves as a turning point in the film where Dee Fens' actions become irreversible, and he fully embraces his path of violence and revenge.
I remember that scene well, Tom.
It really showcases Robert Duvall's acting skills as he tries to grapple
with the implications of what just happened and make sense of it all. And speaking of the film's turning points, do you think there are any other moments in Falling Down that significantly impact the story or character development?
Yes, I believe so, Timothy. One such moment occurs early on when Dee Fens loses his job after being fired from his position at the bank. This event serves as a catalyst for his descent into madness and sets him on a path towards violence and revenge. It's a pivotal point in the film because it shows how seemingly small events can snowball into much bigger problems, ultimately leading to the chaos we see unfold throughout the rest of the movie.
Absolutely, Tom. And speaking of character development, I think it's worth mentioning how well-rounded some of the supporting characters are in this film. Take, for example, Dee Fens' ex-wife, played by Tuesday Weld, who provides insight into his past and helps us understand why he might be struggling so much with anger and frustration. She is an essential part of the story, even though she doesn't share as much screen time as Michael Douglas or Barbara Hershey.
I completely agree with you, Timothy. And that's what makes Falling Down such a well-crafted piece of cinema. It focuses on character development and explores complex themes through its storytelling rather than relying solely on action and suspense. It forces us to confront difficult issues while also providing moments of human connection and understanding, which is something that many films in the thriller genre often lack.
Well, said Tom.
And now that we've discussed Falling Down in great detail, I think it's only fitting
that we wrap up our discussion with our final thoughts on this amazing film. So, Tim, what do you think? What was your overall impression of Falling Down after watching it all these years later?
Well, Tim, as I mentioned earlier, Falling Down is a true masterpiece of cinema that stands the test of time. It's a thrilling and captivating film that manages to balance action with emotion while exploring complex themes like class struggle, racism, and police brutality. The performances from Michael Douglas and Barbara Hershey are outstanding, and the supporting cast adds depth and nuance to what could have been a purely sensationalistic story. It's definitely one of my all-time favorite films, and I think it will continue to inspire generations of filmmakers and audiences alike for years to come.
Absolutely, Tom. And I couldn't agree more. Falling Down is a powerful and captivating film that manages to entertain while also challenging us to confront difficult truths about ourselves and our society. It's a testament to the talent of director Joel Schumacher, writer Ebbe Rose Smith, and an incredible cast led by Michael Douglas and Barbara Hershey. I think this film will continue to resonate with audiences for many years to come as it remains relevant in our current social climate.
Well said, Timothy. And before we sign off on tonight's discussion, let me leave you with one final thought. If you haven't seen Falling Down yet, or it's been a while since your last viewing, do yourself a favor and give it another watch. It's truly a must-see film for any fan of thrillers or anyone who appreciates great storytelling and acting. And don't forget to leave us a comment below telling us what you thought of our discussion or sharing your own thoughts on Falling Down.
Absolutely, Tom. Thank you all for joining us tonight as we discuss the incredible film Falling Down. Remember to like, subscribe, and comment on this video so we can continue to bring you more engaging discussions about films and television shows that matter. Until next time, good night and pleasant dreams, everyone.